You're a forgetful 6-year-old grandpa with a six-pack who befriends a baby tiger and a sickly 10-year-old boy. You then watch that kid get absolutely wrecked while you chop vegetables, hang out with a chicken, grow potatoes, just your typical pirate stuff. And after about 5.5 hours of this, you get to play the appropriately titled Like a Dragon Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. Yeah, you heard me correctly at the start. Pirate Yakuza takes around 5.5 hours before it stops funneling your actions and before it allows you to experience its awesome main loop of doing side quests, minigames, and fighting throughout Hawaii to become the best pirate you can be. Of course, that's all assuming you don't skip things like cutscenes, that you can read at a reasonable speed, and that your general skills are okay. Now, depending on the kind of player you are, that 5.5 hour count could sound like a death sentence, or maybe that's the exact kind of methodical approach you're into. But the hour count isn't the whole story. What matters is what actually happens in those hours, so let's dig into it. Pirate Yakuza is very clearly a hyper-serious franchise spin-off where you do extremely realistic pirate things, like playing baseball, participating in musicals, feeding your baby tiger who you're being gaslit into thinking is a regular cat, slaying dozens of enemies within seconds, and of course, you get to recruit the legendary Captain Beef that everyone knows and loves. This Yakuza spin-off is incredibly stupid, and that's not an insult at all. It's a video game-ass video game, and it wants you to have lots of stupid fun with its many gameplay systems, minigames, and side activities, and loads of colorful and interesting characters. The game has you playing the fan favorite Goro Majima, a charismatic and seemingly carefree ex-Yakuza who's lost his memory. The setup is extremely video gamey, which again is not necessarily a bad thing, and without spoiling anything, I'll say that you try to get your memories back while captaining a modern-day pirate crew sailing on an old-timey wooden ship while trying to work your way through various stages of the Pirate Coliseum in a place called Atlantis that's like a pirate Las Vegas out in the sea, so that you can be the best pirate of all time and find the mythical treasure. By the way, the sickly 10-year-old and the baby tiger are part of your crew and even offer gameplay support. I promise you I'm not making any of this up or exaggerating at all. This is what the Like a Dragon Yakuza games are really like, and this one is not set in an alternate reality or anything like that. In fact, it's weirdly a good entry point if you're interested in the series because of the whole amnesia thing. Pirate Yakuza knows it's a video game through and through, and that's worth celebrating and enjoying. You sail the high seas looking for treasure, and you slash endless hordes of enemies who try to get in your way. However, I gotta say that the game's early design choices clash with the main open-ended gameplay loop, and I can see this rubbing some people the wrong way potentially. You should know that these games are pretty notorious for their slow starts. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes a slow start can hook you like nothing else and convey a level of character or world building that you don't get from big action set pieces. But other times, a slow start can give you the wrong impression of a game or make you feel like it's full of filler, or it might just drag on for seemingly no reason. And when it comes to Pirate Yakuza, its first 5.5 hours are kind of like a very fancy visual novel or TV show. I know that sounds crazy to say, but the majority of this time is spent watching cutscenes or reading dialogue and tutorial screens. It sort of feels like you get to play the game for 5 or 10 minutes at a time, and then the game says, hold on fam, let me show you some fun stuff. I promise it's going to be way more fun later when you actually get to do it properly. It's such a tease because from the gameplay perspective, you get a lot of systems thrown at you at once that seem really awesome, but then you only get to experience them for an incredibly short amount of time. So if you're the type of player who needs the tutorials, and of course there's nothing wrong with that, you're not really going to learn how to play well from this. And if you're the type of player who hates tutorials or is great at video games, you're probably going to feel like this isn't the best use of your time. The core combat is incredibly fun though. RGG Studio clearly took a lot of inspiration from games like Spider-Man and Batman, all while building on the foundations of the brawler gameplay that they've been doing for many years now. Majima is a fast fighter with tons of flashy moves, air launchers, and really easy and cool combos. You can perform superhero level attacks, team up with your AI buddies, and you're just generally a silly menace that's a lot of fun to play. But you barely get a taste of this during the early parts because the game throws aimless enemies at you on the standard difficulty. You don't need to do anything except for mash 1 or 2 buttons to defeat them, and they often go down within seconds. If you're generally an okay video game player, you're going to be finishing most fights in absolutely no time. It's going to feel like you're barely doing the combat. And you know what? Full disclosure, I debated not even saying this, but I have an absolutely psychotic confession to make here. I recognized very early on what was going on with the introductory combat, so I straight up stopped paying attention to it once it stopped giving new mechanics. During most of these early combat scenarios, I was actually looking at texts from friends, and yeah, I know that sounds like next level brain rot. I know, I'm sorry. I've never done anything like this before with a game, but that should tell you how these early encounters play out. And it's not just me saying this is a very common sentiment you'll find all across the fandom. The standard difficulty treats you like you've never played games before, which I think would make more sense for the easy difficulty. Now, to be fair, I've been playing this series for hundreds and hundreds of hours across all of its games across a really long period of time. So I kind of already know how the game works to a certain degree, but if you have any kind of video game literacy or any kind of video game skill, you will not experience any challenge or any complex thoughts during the early game combat here. Of course, it ramps up later on. Also, on a technical level, there were a lot of weird issues with the combat camera placement, but changing the FOV fixed it for me, and there are more serious technical issues as well, but we'll get to those in a little bit. So anyway, the early game combat is a bit of a dull experience that's constantly interrupted by non-interactive sequences, but it's so flashy at the same time that it makes you want more, and it does get you excited for when it's actually time to apply those systems against enemies that can damage you or offer you any kind of challenge. I adore that the combat here doesn't follow any logic other than video game logic, and that means you get to have lots of fun moves and interesting upgrades over time. RGG Studio have really nailed the combat in their last few games, and it's great to see this continue to build on that. And hey, this is a pirate-themed game after all, so let's talk about that. You take over an old wooden ship and its crew, and of course you're out there hunting for treasure like any pirate worth their salt. Now, if you're confused by the idea of there being old-timey pirates in our contemporary times, honestly, don't even worry about it. It's silly, it's not that deep. You're not here for realism if you're interested in a game called Pirate Yakuza, Like a Dragon, whatever, Hawaii. Ship controls are totally arcadey. You can do things like trigger speed boosts and drift, and you've got your machine gun and side cannons for combat. Controlling and fighting with your ship is easy and responsive. It's a streamlined experience that's strictly focused on fun, and you're not going to be confusing this game for a sailing or a ship management simulator. You do manage your crew though. You're tasked with maintaining their morale, you're setting up their roles on the ship, which have different gameplay effects in combat, and you can even assign a first mate who gives you specific skills or perks, like having an extra smoke screen, for example. As you'd expect, you expand your crew over the course of the game, and I don't want to spoil anything, so I'll just tell you that you'll see the most oddball crew made up of character from Yakuza's history, including ninjas, bikini girls, animals, nerds, businessmen, grandmas, and so much more. Also, as Majima, you can fire a rocket launcher from your ship's deck, because of course you can. Getting around the open seas is easy, especially since there are plenty of fast travel points, and you can always catch wind for massive boosts. Also, as you sail around, you'll find some islands with hidden treasure, and you'll dock on them for brief combat encounters that end in you finding some goodies or equipment. The naval stuff at the start of the game is novel, but it's just as handholdy as everything else. Sailing here isn't like the open-ended experience you might get from something like Sea of Thieves. It's a much more linear one, and it has you sailing on set maps. The treasure hunting island aspect is probably the most slapped together part of the game. It's not really a major experience of any kind, but it also doesn't ruin the game or anything like that. I would say that if you're looking for the next big pirate game like Assassin's Creed Black Flag or like Sea of Thieves, this is not it. This is a pirate themed Yakuza. It's the same Like a Dragon franchise that you might already know from before, but with a different coat of paint going in a slightly different direction. Obviously, the pirate aspect of the game is there. It's significant overall in terms of how much you engage with it, but it's a secondary aspect to the main gameplay experience of running around Hawaii, where you do side quests, bond with characters, and get up to minigame hijinks. These core Yakuza pillars of side quests, character bonding, and minigames are all still there and just as fun as usual. There's no series out there that makes you connect with a virtual environment as deeply as Yakuza, but there's a limit to that as well. RGG Studio keeps pumping out these games at unbelievable breakneck speeds, and if you're keeping up with them, you're naturally going to need to take a break to keep it fresh and not burn out. If this is your first Like a Dragon game, everything is going to be novel for you. You're going to be on a wonderful journey that introduces you to a whole new world. But if this is your 5th or 10th one of these games, well, you might be feeling a little bit of that, been there, done that kind of sentiment. These games are formulaic, and the formula is amazing, but even longtime series fans like me will sometimes take multi-year breaks because you can only do the same things so many times before you're no longer in the mood for them. And nowhere is the formula more noticeable than in the early parts of the Pirate Yakuza story. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything here, but I will say that the first 5.5 hours of the game are basically acting like a completely predictable first act of a movie. If you have any media literacy or familiarity with this series, you'll know exactly how each conversation and story beat will play out down to the exact timing of it. And don't get me wrong, there's a beauty in familiarity. It's not inherently a bad thing. The new cast of characters are all great and fun. The writing and cutscene direction is impeccable, though with a heavy focus on exposition. And realistically, if you're new to the series, you'll be hooked because there's nothing like it in gaming. But if you're not new, then the opening hours are just kind of spinning their wheels story-wise, and you're kind of thinking, well, okay, I totally get it. Let's go. Come on now. Let's get going, shall we? Now, yeah, you've heard me say plenty of positive things about this game while also pointing out some of its tropes or lower quality aspects. And I'm saying all of these things because I want you to be informed about the product you're potentially spending your hard-earned money and time on. But I want to make one thing very, very clear. It's absolutely amazing and wonderful that this game exists, especially in a landscape of game companies laying off studios like it's a billionaire CEO's favorite hobby. Seriously, RGG Studio has created such a sustainable video game production pipeline that they can just be like, yeah man, of course we're gonna do a spin-off game that's pirate themed, why wouldn't we? And for whatever faults or nitpicks the game might have, Pirate Yakuza is still a high quality experience that you're not gonna get anywhere else. It's fun, it's full of heart, it's earnest, it wants you to laugh and cry, but most of all, it wants you to have a good time. Honestly, this shit needs to be studied and celebrated. The entire game industry can and should learn from this. I love this series and I love that it's not afraid to take risks, and like all Yakuza fans, I'm here for what it's serving, and even though breaks are sometimes needed for sure, I love what these games have to offer. What I don't love is the technical issues Pirate Yakuza has, some of which have been around for years in the franchise. So this is something that's definitely got to get patched, or might even be patched by the time you watch this, but the game can't stop crashing on PC. I had 7 crashes in 5.5 hours on a top-of-the-line system, and other people are reporting constant crashes on both low-end and high-end computers. There is no widespread fix at this time of recording. Some things work for some people, and the workaround RGG posted isn't really doing it. Now, of course, this crashing doesn't affect everyone, but it's clear that this is a serious enough problem with how many complaints there are. So make sure you save often. It's super frustrating. Almost as frustrating as when someone goes in the comments in a thread and is like, well, I don't have any crashing, so ... Another issue is the in-game contrast, and it seems to be getting worse with each recent release in the series. I'm playing on a fancy modern OLED screen that's been meticulously calibrated because I'm an insane person, but the game displays bright areas as way too bright and dark areas as way too dark. It's really jarring, it's really visually annoying, and it's something that many other players have noticed as well. And I don't know how much of that comes through with the YouTube compression and all of that, but it's really frustrating because you lose visual detail in a game that's full of personality. The game's lighting looks incredible in dark areas with light sources, but transitioning from bright to dark is hell, and just very bright or very dark scenes just don't look great. There's no way to fix this with in-game settings, and some people are saying that changing the black levels on your screen makes it better, but you really shouldn't have to fiddle around with your screen just for one game to look right, especially when it messes up your other games. I really hope this finally gets addressed because it's getting so much worse than before, and if it keeps going in this direction, at some point the Yakuza games are just going to be a white square and a black square on your screen. And finally, the series has had a long-running problem of resetting certain graphics options without you actually changing them, so every time you change some settings, you gotta double check that all your settings are still good. Despite these technical issues, some of which you won't necessarily even experience yourself, Pirate Yakuza is a game that's full of heart and proudly yells at you that it's a video game and that video games should be fun and interesting to play. It's insane that it exists, and I'm really glad that it does, and I'm definitely going to keep playing it and finish it, though maybe not today, might not be tomorrow, might not even be a year from now. But that's the thing about being a fan of these games. No matter how much of a break you take, you always come back to them because nothing else can do what they do. But this is all what I think. Tell me, what do you think? Drop a comment down below about your thoughts on Pirate Yakuza or the series in general. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more of these, be sure to like and subscribe. I love to post videos like these, reviews, game guides, and more. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.